it feels like a more active disgust and distrust and dislike of humanity. Whereas like a subtly different attitude from the Murderbot in the books to me was always more like just uninterested in a lot of what humans are doing. And it's maybe a bit like, oh, they're so foolish, that's why I'm disinterested. Whereas at times it felt like a lot of genuine anger and hate almost coming from Murderbot towards the humanity around it.
Welcome, friends, to episode 352 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we discuss Paul and Carl Weitz's 2025 series, Murderbot. I'm excited. We left off on quite a cliffhanger here at the end of episode 5, but I've really been enjoying myself seeing Skarsgård in this Murderbot role. It's an interesting tone, you know? What are you thinking about it so far?
So we've only watched the first 5 episodes, we should say. We have not watched the entire season yet. But yeah, I would say I'm enjoying it so far. Definitely a little different. There's been some changes made to the tone, to the character, to the world. I have not read all the books, as I went over in our previous episode on the book. I've read 3 of the books, which is like just a little portion of it, because I think several of the later books are even longer. They're like full novels. So I have a little bit of context, but I'm not like someone who's read and memorized the series and can tell you every little thing that is being changed. All that being said, I'm having a good time with the show so far. It's definitely, it like took a little getting used to. Skarsgård in this role. It's a little strange. I agree with some friends of mine who talked about how like this just wasn't really their like dream cast for the role. They wanted someone non-binary. I saw Emma Darcy thrown around a lot, just like as a dream cast for Murderbot, which would have been really, really fun and would have leaned into that like non-binary sort of identity that we get from Murderbot in the books. But I think Skarsgård's a big name. I think it's going to draw a lot of eyes to the show, and I think Murderbot fans are going to want this show to go on and to have more than one season, have some popularity. And so at the very least, I hope that the star power of Skarsgård will help that to become a reality.
I did read in my research that they were interested in any gender, but what they liked about Skarsgård was his presence, right? He's got a large presence. He's intimidating on screen, that sort of thing. But I agree. Like, he strikes me as Alexander Skarsgård. He's like, he's an attractive guy. He's
pretty masculine.
He's the type to put butts in seats as well. Like, he's got the pedigree too, where like I look at his previous work and I'm like,
sure.
And when I saw it, I was like, you know what? He's done well with the role. I think it's cool to see his like mannerisms and some of the odd ways that he's trying to depict a robot. It's been really fun, and like the humor I think is solid for especially his narration, which I think is like really harkening back to a lot of what I liked in Martha Wells' original story, All Systems Red, and how it's comedic, but only because the character doesn't necessarily understand humans in the way, and we're reading it from that character's perspective. Yeah. And I think a lot of that's coming out, and it's been interesting to see. What we maybe theorized last week is that there may be, with like balancing the tone, there may be some shifting to the show feeling more comedic. And I do think that's happening, but I also think that it's like a welcoming 30-minute long like sci-fi show that feels less dystopian and more. It feels like it's like in conversation with the dystopia, obviously, but it feels like it's more like poking fun and tongue-in-cheek.
So that reaction, my initial one originally was more to the trailer that I think really showed off that comedic tone. I think that's definitely present in the show, but I would agree that like it's maybe not like all the time. The world they're in still feels pretty serious. It's just that Murderbot's deadpan delivery is quite comical, and then the humans that are surrounding it are kind of goofballs, and that definitely adds a level of comedy to the thing. But before we get too far down the road, I want to like step back for a moment. Couple things. First off, very exciting news. James and I are going to be going to Worldcon, and Ink to Film will be doing our first ever live show, and that's going to be interviewing Martha Wells about Murderbot. So if you're a Murderbot fan listening to this, You're definitely going to want to check that out. We are going to be there for the whole convention, but the show itself is scheduled to be on the 15th, which I believe is Friday, at 4:30 to 5:30. Now, that is still subject to change. I think it's still kind of a rough schedule, so that could change. But if you're in the Seattle area and you want to come to Worldcon, we'd love to see you come out. Martha Wells is the guest of honor, so if you're a Murderbot fan, you should be aware of this. And we'd love to just say hi to you and for people to come out and listen to this. I'm really excited about that.
I mean, I'm just over the moon about this. I'm really excited to meet Martha Wells and covering this project right now. I just feel I have so many questions that I can't wait to ask. And I feel honored that she's willing to come on our show. And I can't wait to see, like, she, like you said, guest of honor. So it's going to be a big room, I'm sure.
Yeah, I have no idea what it's going to be like. I assume so, but we'll see. It is something we are planning to release on the main feed, assuming that the audio ends up being usable. The plan is to get it recorded. We're working with the con to get all this worked out. But I would say that the way to guarantee that you're going to be able to hear it, obviously, is to go. But otherwise, we will eventually be releasing it onto the main feed if you're unable to make it. And that's going to be another Creative Conversations episode, which we've only done a few of now. And we're really putting up a lineup together that I'm really proud of. So I think it's going to be an awesome addition to that.
A lot of sci-fi so far. 3 sci-fi, one horror.
So we got to do some like fantasy or just like a drama or something. Yeah. But anyway, I'm really excited about that. Hopefully you all will join us for that if you're in the area. Okay, so the other thing I did want to say as we're moving forward in this coverage, Murderbot uses its pronouns in the book. In the show, it also uses its pronouns. However, there's at least one character I caught so far using he, him pronouns to describe Murderbot. That's in a later episode. So I don't know how prevalent that's going to be going forward, if we might start to see more of that as we get into questions about the gender of Murderbot might become a plot point. I don't know. But regardless, its is what we're going to use. However, obviously Murderbot is played by Alexander Skarsgård, who uses he, him pronouns. And so at times, if we're describing Skarsgård, I can foresee us using he, him pronouns to describe like his performance, right? So it just might get a little tricky. We're going to try and keep it straight as much as we can in our heads, but just be aware.
Yeah, most likely he, him, we're talking about Skarsgård and his performance. It's, we're talking in-world character. So we're going to try to stay true to that.
All right, that's all I got to say. But let's talk more generally, I guess. What were your thoughts? You're new to Murderbot. You just read All Systems Red for the first time last week, and then now you're diving into the show. Did you have any like immediate reactions to things being different, or even just seeing the character come to life on the screen? Like, how did you feel?
I think we're getting added characters, added some added plot points maybe here along the way. But overall, I think, and in my research, I was seeing how much these filmmakers were trying to stay true to Martha Wells' vision here. And so in that way, I found it to be really refreshing and fun to watch. I found it very watchable. Watch 5 episodes in,
it
one
is
evening.
like a compulsive viewing experience. We binged through this thing fast, my wife and I.
Yeah.
These little 30-minute bites are like, they're just enough for you to get excited about the show and to get like into the character and into the drama, and then it ends and you're like, oh, what? It's over? All right, start the next one.
Exactly.
And I was theorizing, I'm like, did they do this because of the whole novella, like to evoke the shortness of a novella too? Because that's one of the things maybe you could argue that made Murderbot so popular is it was this digestible short, not even a full-length novel. And so maybe I wonder if that played into the decision to make these short episodes.
Well, I think it definitely did. And I've heard Paul and Chris Weitz talk about this a little bit. They didn't want to pad out these episodes. Like, you could have done this with longer form episodes but like in staying true to, like you said, the kind of feel of the story, I think shorter episodes is working for shorter fiction. And in an interesting way, because of the medium shift here, which we talk about often, is they had to make decisions that Martha Wells left like less detail in for the sake of the story and like kind of the pacing of it. And so, like how things looked and getting really, really specific about like how characters are interacting in ways that Martha Wells didn't necessarily want to pursue, at least in this first story.
The first book is so close to Murderbot's perspective that we don't get a lot of the like finer points of what's going on with these individuals, because we get it all often in kind of summary, and it's a kind of a dismissive summary. It's like, not really interested in what's going on. It seems like this character likes this character and that's it. Whereas the show, like, it has to show us something. right? And we're in the room viewing it, and it needs to be a compelling scene. So yeah, by sort of the nature of that, I think a lot of this is getting more fleshed out. And if you remember last week, I talked about how it felt like there was a whole nother book that could have been written from the point of view of the crew who have this strange murder bot that they're trying to figure out how to interact with. And it feels like the writers, the Weitzes, is that what you said their names are?
Yeah, Weitz.
It feels like they agree, because I think that's one of the elements that this show is bringing to the fore, is the perspective more of the scientists around Murderbot and their interactions and their perspective on Murderbot itself.
And in making some of these decisions during the adaptation process, I was happy to hear that Martha Wells actually was like consulting on a lot of these changes. These filmmakers had a direct line to Martha Wells and would ask, this is a change we're thinking about, and said that she was really collaborative, and like whether she, like sometimes she would like what they came with, and other times she would say, okay, cool, but what do you think about this as like another option, and like building out some of the world. And I did hear that in episode 2, there's the creatures, and they're kind of piled up. I don't want to say exactly what's happening. Because people are trying to avoid spoilers here, but they're piled up. And apparently that was Martha Wells' idea to have that sort of situation happening.
Cool. That makes me like that detail even more, because now I'm really curious about it.
Yeah.
I love that.
So I loved hearing that like she was so involved, consulting, pitching ideas, all that kind of stuff. That makes me feel like the show can do certain changes and still have the blessing of the original source material, and in those ways kind of still stay true to that universe that she maybe didn't explore in that first book that we read quite so much, just because of, like we've said, the shorter pace of it, the shorter length, and then
she even said she wanted to include only the bare minimum, just enough to get you into the story and keep it moving.
But this was her chance to kind of say, no, this is what I was imagining, and put that on screen.
Well, plus she's written a bunch more books now, so all systems read, she probably hadn't developed a lot of this stuff yet, whereas now you get the benefit of looking at all the stuff you've built over the years.
So you were asking about things that I was responding to in the just generally. I think one of the things that I liked the most was the way that they've done the rise and fall of Sanctuary Moon. The way that was depicted in the show, and like you can see it as like this, like almost sort of like schlocky soap kind of thing that she was evoking, and they had so much fun creating it for the show. You can tell like the cameos that come in, the way that they're shooting it on a virtual stage, so it looks like more campy and like
it looks like a show, right?
Yeah, looks like a stage, and that juxtaposed with the real world where they're practically building a lot of those sets, and there's like a lot of that stuff that we're seeing the actors are actually interacting with. So it's just really fun, and that was one of the things that I thought that they absolutely nailed the most.
Yeah.
Along with, I think, Skarsgård, just kind of his I mentioned it already, but his mannerisms and the way that he's embodying the character, I think it's working for me in a character that I thought was going to be really difficult to capture.
Yeah. So two things on the Sanctuary Moon stuff. I love how it's that, and then also I think we've seen some other shows. We've seen some clips of other shows, but I feel like every time they bring up those moments, there's like a subtle sort of mirroring, or through a sort of funhouse mirror, maybe even of theme, of plot points, of something. There's usually they're using it in a way to like subtly comment on whatever the content of like the episode is that we're currently watching.
Definitely.
So I think it's a really fun way to use that. Whereas in the book, it's more like you mention Sanctuary Moon, but you don't usually get into the minutia of what's going on. But here it's like, you see scenes playing out a little bit. You hear conversations between these characters, and often it seems to kind of be speaking about something that Murderbot is currently dealing with.
It definitely like meta commentary, and then also just about the sci-fi genre as a whole, and some like the tropes that come up, and the ways that like this show may be engaging with those tropes, but then subverting expectations along the way. And
we also get the implication that this is kind of teaching Murderbot a lot about humanity too. Like a lot of what it's learning about humanity outside of its direct experience has been from watching these shows.
Yeah, and I mentioned last week, like I feel like oftentimes in life, many of us, myself included, I felt like an outsider at times, and like I think that like I don't know if it's my outlook on the world or what it is, but I identify with the idea of learning empathy through story, and like learning through film, specifically like Murderbot is here, and like I find that to be so relatable, and that all that stuff, while it is like a bit ridiculous what they're doing with the Sanctuary Moon stuff for comedic purposes, the moral of it, I think, is true, and I think is like resonant for a lot of people.
So I had a bit of a strong reaction early on in the show to Skarsgård as Murderbot and the way he chooses to deliver some of the lines, and some of that could be direction and writing as well. But I want to save that, actually. I think I'm going to save that till we get into episode 1. So I'm going to put a pin in that, and we'll return to it. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the filmmakers. You've already hinted at it a little bit. I know nothing about them. These are names that I don't think I'm familiar with, but maybe I should be. I don't know. Let me know.
Yeah, you are familiar with these directors, whether you realize it or not. So
okay.
Paul and Chris Weitz. They were originally a duo. They are writers, directors, and producers. They started out working on the comedy films American Pie and About a Boy.
Okay, well, I certainly know American Pie. I remember seeing that. I don't think I saw About a Boy, but yeah.
Wrote and directed that. About a Boy, yeah. Actually, they were nominated for an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay for that film. So American Pie to About a Boy, nominated for an Academy Award. And then they actually, at that point, around that point, split off and started doing individual projects. Paul Weitz went on to do Mozart in the Jungle for Amazon Prime. He wrote plays such as Roulette, Privilege, Show People, and Trust. All of were produced off-Broadway in New York City. He also wrote and directed a romantic comedy called In Good Company and the political satire American Dreams. And then actually adapted a young adult novel called Cirque du Freak based on The Vampire's Assistant, which I actually think I may have read that. I don't remember how old that story is, but yeah, he adapted that and then directed Little Fockers, which was the sequel to Meet the Parents and Meet the Fockers.
Wow. Okay, I feel like I vaguely remembered that was a movie, and you just like activated that memory. I had completely forgotten that Little Fockers was a thing.
So had I. Yeah, 2010. Yeah. So
Wow.
that was that.
Okay.
And then his brother Christopher Weitz, of course, worked on all the stuff early on that I talked about they worked on together. And then he was also a lead actor in a Mike White directed film called Chuck and Buck. He directed the film adaptation of The Golden Compass and the film adaptation of New Moon, the Twilight film.
Oh, wow. Okay. Which we might cover at some point.
Yeah, The Golden Compass and New Moon are things that we could cover at some point. And honestly, Cirque du Freak as well, which Paul directed. If, those are adaptations that we could...
About a Boy, it sounds like it even was as well.
So it would be cool to return to these guys.
They have a history of doing some adaptations for sure, it sounds like.
And I think like New Moon is one that we've already started the coverage of Twilight. It's a fun one for our podcast because it's not our typical fare. Yeah.
I had never seen it until we covered it. That was
we had a lot of fun with it though. Yeah. And I think a lot of our listeners did as well. Christopher also went on to direct live-action Cinderella in 2015, and he co-wrote Rogue One with Tony Gilroy.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, I like Rogue One.
It's been, obviously in the zeitgeist recently with Andor and how amazing Andor
currently
was.
watching right now. I'm enjoying the season 2. He's, both of them sound like they're pretty accomplished, but it sounds to me like not, I guess Rogue One is sci-fi, so it sounds like that's kind of similar, but like for the most part, that's pretty different kind of fare. So it's interesting to see him jumping here, but like I never want to judge directors too much based off of that. We often see people make the jump from comedy to drama. Not that that's the case here, but like, and sometimes you get really amazing work. This definitely has comedy elements to it. Comedy, I would say, is like one of its, you would say, sci-fi comedy. Like I think that's pretty prevalent here. So maybe having that background in comedy is actually working really well for them.
It's really interesting to describe this as a sci-fi comedy because even after finishing Martha Wells' story, I don't know that it's a funny story. And maybe that's what's kind of happening in translation here a little bit, where it's becoming like a capital C comedy. Yeah. Because I almost felt like it was like a sci-fi story with those elements in it, but it felt like more, I don't know, maybe some more grounded or more dark, maybe, in a sense.
I would say early on it has felt much more in the world of comedy with like some dramatic elements. I hope that as the show goes on, because I'm already attached, but I think like general viewers will become more and more attached to Murderbot as a character. I hope that we can start to play with that and introduce some more dramatic elements and emotional beats and stuff like that. Yeah.
And I think they've set themselves up, like we haven't even finished the show yet, so I'm just speculating here, but they have set themselves up nicely to have this tone match the group that Murderbot is with. So if we know how obviously the story ends, which I don't want to spoil for anybody who's here for just the first 5 episodes, but you and I finished it last week, and I think there's room for the tone of the show to change kind of with whoever Murderbot is interacting with in a sense, and like maybe this situation ends up being a little more comedic and there's room for other, pivoting.
You're right, and because a lot of the comedy is brought by this group of kind of goofballs that are surrounding Murderbot. We've seen a few characters outside of this initial group that are also kind of oddballs, and some of them are kind of funny. So we might see more and more of that, but yet to be seen. I definitely could foresee darker elements, more serious stuff. We got some tastes of that in these early episodes, so I'll be curious to track that as we go forward for sure.
And I do want to note, this is it's really cool for these brothers as they've gone on to have these really successful solo careers. This is the first time they've come back together in 20 years to work on a project together. So we're
love to hear about brothers coming together to do some good work,
do some murderbotting.
Yeah.
So originally Paul read it, liked it a lot, sent it to Chris, and they kind of fell in love with it together. And then they wanted to pursue adapting it. And in 2021, Martha Wells said that there was a potential TV series adaptation that was in development. I think that was pushed on by these two. That would be something interesting to ask Martha about when we get to speak to her.
For sure.
She said that she'd read the script and was really excited about it. And then it began to move forward, and then the casting and some of the other things were delayed due to the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike. So stalled out a little bit there, obviously understandably and for a good cause. But it was then, after the strike ended, they continued. We were able to get casting done, and then we're able to get the show into development. So it definitely seems like it was kind of the passion from Chris and Paul that were able to kind of put their production weight behind it and work alongside Martha to get this made.
Interesting. Cool. Yeah, I'll be definitely curious to get some more details on that from her. Just because I find this stuff endlessly fascinating, like how it got from book to screen is just, it's always such an interesting journey.
I mean, even recently when we spoke with Edward Ashton, just like hearing the inside baseball of like agents talking to so-and-so and the people who are there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I don't think many people have access to. So yeah, I'd love to hear more. So as obviously Martha was involved, people have been asking her about the show in general. At a Toronto Q&A recently, she called it a great fanfic, which I think is interesting too. And I'd love to ask her to elaborate on that a little bit, because I think that means she's excited about the adaptation. She likes a lot of what she's seeing, but also like it's running in parallel, but it's not the same thing as her world. So the book is its own thing and the show is its own thing. And I think it's nice to hear artists kind of identify that. Yeah. It's like they can never be purely the same thing.
Right.
But
we're big proponents of that perspective, because that's totally true. And like I would say, like a lot of Murderbot fans out there who might be a little frustrated with some of the decisions being made, I think that's a good thing to sort of remember and hold close to your chest, is that the books are always going to be their own thing. They are going to be the purest form, because that's what comes from Martha Wells directly, and that's to my opinion, like the canon of Murderbot. And then we start talking about the show. It's a separate creation. It has its own canon, but like it's never going to be the same. And it's good to keep those things separate. Also, I don't think that's an insult coming from Martha Wells, because as we talked about with her background, she's written lots of fanfic over the years and has been active in that community. So I don't think she means that as anything like any sort of dismissive statement, which I think some people could interpret it as that. I don't think so. I think that's actually her being very aware of the power fanfic has, and I don't think she means that as an insult at all.
Yeah, and of course it's going to feel different. It's going to go in a different artistic direction when it's someone else adapting it, someone else giving their voice to it. Just in general, I saw a lot of interesting quotes from Carl and Paul. Like Carl Weitz had a quote that he said, "You don't want the threat to ever become goofy, and you don't want the humor to ever undermine the stakes." So it's interesting to think about.
It's an interesting balancing act. Yeah, I can see that.
And then into another quote that I saw, they said they were approaching the challenge of capturing the book's distinct blend of sci-fi, science fiction, dry humor, and emotional depth by avoiding overthinking the original tone. So that's a really interesting, part of the adaptation process, and like having an artist kind of take the story and make it their own.
Yeah.
And saying like, we're trying not to get so bogged down on trying to nail exactly Martha Wells' voice. We're obviously adapting and changing something and creating something wholly new that is like in conversation with, and of course will appeal to the fans because they get to see this thing come to life on the screen. But it's like they did an interesting job of saying like this is their thing, and we love Martha's input, but it is different. I think that's all. It's cool to hear all the creatives are on the same page. It sounds like Martha and the Weitz brothers as well. So
it's cool, man. We love that collaboration between the creator and the showrunners. Like that's always good to hear.
So if you're ready, I think it's time to jump into these episodes. We will read a brief summary and then jump into the specifics.
Yeah. So obviously spoilers going forward for each of the episodes as we talk about them.
First episode is called Free Commerce. A private security cyborg, annoyed by humans, hacks the governing module that forces it to obey their commands. Hiding its new autonomy to avoid being destroyed, the SecUnit renames itself Murderbot on a whim. A team of researchers is compelled to accept Murderbot on their mission to meet their insurance requirements, but are hesitant to do so as it seems akin to slavery. On the planet, Murderbot enjoys watching reruns of television, especially a soap opera, The Rise and Fall of Sanctuary Moon. Two researchers come under attack from a massive centipede-like creature, but are saved by Murderbot. Bharadwaj is seriously injured and Arata goes into shock. While bringing them back to the habitat, Murderbot lowers its mask to reveal a human face and comforts Arata. After returning to the habitat, the augmented human Garothin is suspicious of this behavior, as well as other clues that Murderbot is not acting as a SecUnit should. The team realizes there are unexplained gaps in the planetary maps and data provided to them, and Murderbot reassures the crew it has no knowledge of why.
Yeah. So once they get onto the planet, like this is right out of the book. This is where the book starts. We do get some preamble before that isn't included in the book, including this moment where we see Murderbot hack its own governor module. We see like kind of a former assignment where this person comes up and has it burn its own hand. Things like that are occurring that are sort of either added or maybe brought in from other sources. We know that Martha Wells has written some short stories and other pieces, and like I don't know if any of the later novellas might go into some like flashback territory. It's definitely possible, but not in the original All Systems Red book.
Yeah, I mean, seeing that first scene, let's just talk about that one. I like the change there. I think that it feels very in keeping with Martha's voice. I like that immediately Murderbot is like, I hate humans. I hate how dumb they are. I hate all this whole scenario. And it seems like there's like kind of like a riot going on around it, or some sort of like,
I don't know,
fight or something.
Yeah, it was something chaotic was going on for sure.
Yeah. You know, there's people coming up and kind of fucking with Murderbot. And then eventually Murderbot's like, I've had enough of this. These people are dumb. I'm going to take care of this. And then hacks its own thing and is like, oh my God, I did it. Yeah. I was able to pull it off.
Yeah. It's interesting, man. So this is, I guess I'll go ahead and talk about Skarsgård's performance here. And how I originally kind of reacted to it. So definitely at first, it didn't line up with my conception of Murderbot. And it's fairly subtle ways, but in ways that at first seem very big. For one, Skarsgård brings a bit of emotive sort of performance to what I have always read as a very dry Murderbot, who speaks sort of very sarcastically. And here, and this continues to be the case throughout, it feels like a more active disgust and distrust and dislike of humanity. Whereas, I don't know, like a subtly different attitude from the Murderbot in the books to me was always more like just uninterested in a lot of what humans are doing. And it's maybe a bit like, oh, they're so foolish, that's why I'm disinterested. Whereas at times it felt like a lot of genuine anger and hate almost coming from Murderbot towards the humanity around it.
I mean, I can see that. I definitely think that there was like a disdain, and there was like that element of like AI, if you want to talk about like other stories of sentient beings, where we think like, oh, the doomsday version of this is they see that we're ridiculous, we have a ridiculous existence, and then decide that we're, redundant or whatever, and just eradicate us. And this is like seeing some of that come out, I think, where like this is a something that's like superior to the people who built it, and is realizing that, and like in this moment could have chosen to become a Murderbot and kill everybody, but instead like says, well, I can make this pretty chill for myself if I push for it. But I like what you're saying about like there is a distinction there to be made, because I read Martha Wells' Murderbot as very like cut and dry, and the way that he was that he's like almost imbuing humanity and like more of a human into this character right away. And maybe that's like to be developed along the course of Murderbot. But like early on, I think I definitely read it as like extremely like sharp, to the point, brief, and this is like almost like more like contemplative than emotional,
right?
Emotional,
It seems like there's a lot of emotion here, and it's fine. It's just a change, right? And I think Skarsgård has a very distinct voice, and I've seen him in a lot of things. So there's also a bit of that of like there's a lot of baggage around hearing Skarsgård talk. So it took a bit for me to like transition to seeing him as Murderbot. But I will say by the end of this episode, I felt pretty on board. And really, as the show went on, it just became more and more the case of me being on board with it. I suspect there are people who may never become fully on board. I wouldn't be shocked to hear that. I have not been reading a lot of fan reactions just to try and kind of keep myself uninfluenced. But you know, and maybe part of it's the fact that I am a man. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm finding it easier to see Murderbot this way. And I can see people of other identities maybe being a little more frustrated with the sort of masculine man being cast in this role. All that being said, I think Skarsgård is doing a good job of not leaning into those elements of his personality and his sort of identity. And we get a more neutral sort of feel from him as Murderbot. And the show even goes out of its way to show that Murderbot has no sex organs and is uninterested in, you know, all the like exchanging of fluids and mushy emotions that the humans are displaying. It does kind of create that weird dynamic of like, why so disinterested in the ones around you, but interested in the ones on the show you're watching? Which is a fair question, I think, for Murderbot in general. But I think if you look at it as sort of a metaphor for, you know, perhaps autism or neurodivergence in some way, I think a lot of people can recognize like, oh, no, I love my shows, but I don't, you know, I still struggle to interact with people in real life. So I think that's kind of the element of it. Like that, the actual interaction element of it is not fun for Murderbot.
To continue that thought too, like I think the way that Murderbot is like not even interested in like the fly on the wall approach of like hacking into the systems and watching the drama unfold in the station is rather interested. And I think this is talked about in the novel where Murderbot is like, yeah, it's a little too real. Like I like these shows because they are like there's like a lightness to them and they're not so serious and so you know, hard to process or something like that.
Yeah, and you know, there's no responsibility. Whereas I think Murderbot puts a lot of responsibility on itself to keep these humans alive and is constantly frustrated with them for doing things that it considers foolish and not in their own self-interest. And it's definitely a balancing act, right? Like the constantly sort of commenting and like little quips in its own head and not responding out loud to people. And most of those land really well for me, but I could definitely see people having issue with how some of this is playing out. But like, I don't know. I'm just gonna say for me, it's working.
I'm enjoying it. I think that like it's a difficult thing to nail down because Murderbot is such a like specific character that means so much to many people. I think I'm quick to think of it as a fun fanfic. Yeah, as Martha Wells put it.
Yeah, I like that. So let's talk about the rest of the crew, though. It's a colorful cast of characters. I like their oddness. They're hippies. They want like the cheapest option. It ends up being it being our Murderbot, right? Which by the way, I love the design. The helmet is very cool. I also like how the design is not as like imposing and militaristic looking as like the more advanced newer models. So even though it is kind of imposing, it's not as like much, and you can see that it's kind of an oddball even in that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the design is cool. I think as you do with when you get Alexander Skarsgård to depict a character like this, that helmet comes open a lot more than I think the
well, there's a lot of like ordering it to leave the helmet off and stuff like that that goes on. And you know, I personally like have come to grips with this. This is something that's true in all shows. Like every fantasy show, like nobody ever wears a fucking helmet and it's the dumbest thing. But like we want like the director wants to show performance. The actor is doing a performance and wants you to see it. And we as audience typically like to see performance. Now, sometimes I would argue you could still achieve some of that performance even through a helmet. I often see why the inclination is to say, let's just not do a helmet at all so we can fully see what's going on. And it's kind of a fantasy space where we can pretend like helmets aren't important.
Yeah, it's funny how that's kind of lampshaded and like they the crew is asking him to take it off. And
Yeah.
that's the reason for us as the audience, we like to see actors' performances in the face and humans react that way. I mean, I think it's probably a subtle thing too in terms of giving humanity to a bot, right? Like quickly for an audience. The rest of the cast is really fun too, though. Like Menza, I like the actor Noma Dumezweni. It's so funny the way that they're playing with this idea of like communal decision making and everyone's equal. And then there's so many times where Mensa like steps in.
First
and, like,
among
I'm interested
equals,
in
which
like,
is was always a funny term to me.
yeah, and it's like I'm curious like what the you know, what are they trying to say with that? Like, are they saying that like communal responses or communal like decision making, obviously like there's some it maybe takes longer, and in some scenarios like this where danger becomes, you know, present, like someone takes charge. I don't know, it's interesting the implication of that, because I don't know,
it's kind of viewed as like a little bit naive, and even Mensa at some point says like we can be pretty naive, but I think there's also an inherent value to that is being shown, and like it's especially when you're comparing it to the company and how like such a capitalist nightmare it is. But then, you know, it's like you're still poking fun at it too. But I think that's fine. You know, it's like you can kind of, I think it's fair to poke some fun at, you know, them having their little like humming circle or whatever at one point. They're like, get in here, Girthen, get in here. You know, like that was really funny, right? And then like, I mean, when they're first outside dancing and Murderbot's like they're outside listening to some truly upsetting music or something like that. It's just, there's a lot of little just goofy things going on. And we got a hint of this. We didn't talk about it much in the book, but there is definitely an element of, it seems that poly relationships are a lot more common in the universe. There's people who are in multi-person marriages, like a 4-way marriage, I think is described at one point, and like people have all these kids, and it seems like this is at least more common, maybe just from this group of scientists and their communities, versus I don't know if that's like this everywhere else or not. And I like to see that like stayed in the show. I don't know. I think it's interesting. You know, we're showing more of that as I think alternative lifestyles are becoming just even more and more of a thing these days, at least that are being talked about. Well,
normalizing for sure. But then again, I'm also interested in like the implication of it's played for jokes at times. And, you know, it seems like there's like an implication that like this 3-way relationship that it gets developed may be destined to fail. And is that based on the people, or are they making a commentary on that sort of relationship? And there's just a lot, I think, that goes into like making jokes. But I think jokes can be thrown around to whoever. I think it's like, you know, it's all par for the course.
It could be like a Trojan horse way to get it in too, right? Like it's like where you can make jokes about it, we can have fun with it, but also we're kind of normalizing it. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of becoming a thing that we're showing can be attempted, and like we can have fun with some of the ways in which it is going to struggle. But I think we've also seen some of the strengths of this situation playing out in different ways. But we also, I think in this first episode, we get the first shots of Sanctuary Moon, and we get to see was it John Cho as the captain? Just some familiar faces. Clark Gregg.
Yeah, with the ridiculous beard.
Yeah, who's
Jack McBrayer?
Yeah. Is that the guy who's he's from like 30 Rock or something, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, so some pretty big actors to be in these like very small roles, but I thought it was really fun.
Definitely.
Doesn't John Cho isn't he actually in Star Trek?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's really funny that he's like this captain in this, fake kind of Star Trek-esque show.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's so funny to see it right away. I was so charmed by it, and I think I could tell everyone was having so much fun. Actors were excited to be involved in that way. And like like I said, there is a weight to it too. Like I think it plays a part in this show that's not just like superfluous, just like, oh, look how flashy this is, and isn't this funny? Yeah. But it's like you said,
I think if you're going to include it as much as you do, you always want to, like, as a storyteller, find ways to make things work in more than one way or more than one avenue. And so, like, you can use it to show, like, this is the show that Murderbot is into, but you can also use it to make meta commentary on sci-fi in general. And you can also use it to mirror some of the thematic things that are going on. Like, I know in a later episode, we get, like, shots where they're dealing with a bot and, like, what it means to be sentient and, like, are you even a person? And like, but it's very over the top, but like, you can tell that that's directly mirroring what's happening in the show you're actually watching in Murderbot.
Yes. Yeah. Another part of the episode that I want to talk about too is like, how did the original face reveal, and for at least for the characters, and the comforting, like how did that work for you when he kind of puts it on to Arata when he's saving them?
Oh yeah, I mean, I thought it was funny in that Murderbot's emotions are, I don't know, I think in watching back the feed, it was clear that it was just kind of saying stuff. I didn't think it was like particularly actually curious about their kids or anything. And it even said like, I just learned this from a show. And that was the vibe I got to it. I thought that all went well, and it was a good little reveal. I do really like the way Skarsgård is playing the in the discomfort with eye contact and like wanting to look over, into the wall and not want to come sit with them. I think later in an episode, it's like, what is it with humans and wanting to sit? It's like a fetish or something. I think that might be out of the book, but it's really funny. And using the feeds to sort of spy on everybody, not really seeing an issue with that because it views it as part of its job in taking care of them. And also it's like kind of an entertainment, I think, element of it too. So, really interesting how that's all set up.
Yeah. All right. So moving into episode 2 here, it's called Eye Contact. Suspicious of Murderbot, Garathan convinces Mensa not to bring the SecUnit along when she investigates a distant, unmapped location. Mensa becomes disoriented while out in the field as another of the same species of creatures that attacked the others bears down on her. It moves past her, however, drawn to a specific spot full of dead creatures, killed by ancient alien remnants. Back at the habitat, Murderbot, uncomfortable with the conversation and eye contact, is asked by Garathan to explain if it is acting outside the boundaries of its programming. Garathan becomes concerned that it has deleted some memories.
Yeah, that gives me an opportunity to talk about Garathan here. This is David Dastmalchian. Malchian. I've seen him in some things. I know he was in Dune. Is like the advisor to the Harkonnens. Kind of a slimy dude in that movie. In that story. And then he was also in Late Night with the Devil, which was like a smaller film that came out a little while ago that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I watched that.
It seems like he's especially in like the horror spaces, people really like him. And this is an interesting role for him, and he's bringing Garathan to life in a way that I'm appreciating. And I really like the sort of competitiveness that Murderbot feels towards Garathan, and you can tell both of them have some mixed feelings about each other because Murderbot is more synthetic, has more sort of computing power and more sort of tactical and synthetic and artificial advantages over what Garathan has. But obviously Garathan is more human, and therefore emotional and all the things we view as human, I think has Murderbot sort of beat in that way, I guess, if you want to say it. So I think both of them are also like subtly jealous of each other. Picking up on, and I like that there's a bit of competitiveness between the two of them and distrust, and even though if you looked at this scenario, it seems like Garathan should be the one who understands Murderbot the most, and in many ways he does, but it's also sometimes just enough to be suspicious of Murderbot.
And also feels intimidated by like the when they tap into the mainframe, like it's funny, like he does it kind of Garathan specifically does it very slowly, I guess it says, and
by comparison to Murderbot,
by comparison, and then Murderbot comes in and just blows by and kind of
because he's an augmented human. I don't know if we said that. Garathan's an augmented human. That's something that we hear about in the book. We don't, in this first book at least, it's not like super explored, but the idea being that there's some sort of implants and some elements that have made Garathan able to interface with technology in a more advanced way, do some computation, stuff like that, sort of enhancing the cognitive abilities, it seems like.
But I did think it's funny, like you said, the rivalry that's going on there. Murderbot taps in, specifically goes out of its way to mess with Garathan.
Yeah, didn't feel you there.
Yep. Sorry about that. Yeah. I thought that was so funny. And in setting all of that up, maybe there is some jealousy there, but Garathan feels a little insecure. And it's interesting to juxtapose that with Murderbot which shouldn't have emotions, as far as a bot is concerned, as far as the characters think. And then is also, I think Murderbot is seeing some of itself in Garothin and sort of anxieties and some of the other things that it has going on.
Yeah, I don't think Murderbot is admitting any of this to itself.
No.
This is all happening, subconsciously, perhaps.
The creatures, we didn't talk much about them in the first episode, but here in the second episode, they
Big
come back.
Big centipede-looking things.
Yeah, Mensa like goes out, and Murderbot the whole time is just like, this is so dumb. Let me come out there. I need to be out there. It's a great example of when it is frustrated with humans and it keeps saying, like, you stupid humans need to let me help you.
Yeah. There's just a lot of fun stuff in this episode. I think this is the one where I really felt like I was being won over by Skarsgård's performance. I think a lot of the eye contact, conversation, it was like, he's really nailing this element of Murderbot. That was the thing that like I wanted to see most. I think that awkwardness around humans, that the discomfort and the managing of interactions, and the look of fear that is on its face when it's like, why don't you stay out here with us? You can like sleep out here with us, or whatever Mensa says to it, something to that effect, right? And Murderbot just looks fucking terrified or just so uncomfortable, and then Mensa's like, or not. I love
it just wants to tuck away and go watch its shows, and it can't. I do think it's interesting with this zone that like is pulsing or whatever's happening, and all those creatures go down to it, and they might be dying, or something
There's some
wild
sort of
happening
something
there.
happening there,
and they say it might be alien tech, and so that's something that I don't think we got in the book.
We did not,
and maybe that's expanded universe stuff that Martha Wells gets.
I don't know. I don't know a ton about it. I mean, I have some knowledge from later books, but not. I don't know for sure.
And I like to see that seeded here, because like even the filmmakers are doing their best to say like they don't want to jinx themselves, but of course they're planning for the future. There will be continuing
they're adapting a series, so they're hoping they're going
to
make more of these. Yeah, absolutely.
And this could be, some of those Easter eggs getting laid. All right, so moving into episode 3, it's called Risk Assessment. Looking for answers about the missing maps and the ancient alien technology, the crew attempt to call the other research crew on the opposite side of the planet, but get no response. Out of concern for them, they decide to go investigate. Garothin and Bharadwaj remain behind while the rest of the crew travels. At the other habitat, Murderbot distributes weapons and takes the lead into the investigation. Murderbot walks in alone and finds its inhabitants dead and other SecUnits destroyed. It lies to its crew and says that everything is fine. Murderbot is attacked by another SecUnit and defeats it before another SecUnit comes up behind it.
Yeah, this was one of those episodes where I felt like there's a really smart expansion going on, because I feel like this played out so fast in the novella. There wasn't a lot of this like build up. There wasn't the approach being, sort of played up in its anticipation. We got a flash of them all being dead, and I think at the end of the previous episode, so it was a cool little hook. And then when we finally get in there, we see the carnage. There's a sense of actual apprehension and how dangerous is the situation. And then when the fight occurs, and Murderbot at the end of this episode gets sort of jumped by that like really advanced looking SecUnit. There's a lot of like good thrilling action and drama being built up here. And I thought that was this is like a smart bit of adaptation, in my opinion, where you're taking something that worked well in the novella, but worked well in sort of a minimalist way and didn't linger here. But I think when you're making a show and you're making, 10 episodes, and that this is going to be one of them, you give it a little bit more. You give it a little bit of time. You give it to develop and to see our characters, and how they react. And we get to cut back to like the ship, and we see them have conversations about what should we do. And, you're developing these interpersonal relationships a little bit more. And I thought this was a really smart spot to slow down a little bit and let this scene build and breathe over the course of really 2 episodes as we get into it in the next one.
And I think sci-fi fans, they want to see visual spectacle when it's put on screen as well too. So like to get that in this and like it's showing the prowess and like the capability of Murderbot going into this environment. And then also, like you said, the relationship, this crew is starting to really care for Murderbot.
Almost it's too fast too, which is hilarious, because I think this has been proven. I know there were some studies about this, but humans are like really hardwired to start to attach emotion and like attachment to inanimate objects. And they will often, people name their cars, they name their Roombas, and people start to develop attachments. And I think you're seeing some of that immediately from the crew, who are like, I think it's Rati, who, by the way, is a pretty consistent source of comedic relief in the show. He's like, I really want it to like me. Like, it's like he immediately, that's like his like number one, goal is like, I want Murderbot to like me. Keeps trying to make friends with it, and then later on is like, I'm friends with a Murderbot, so sue me, and it's like, Murderbot's like, what are you talking about? We are not friends. I don't know. It's so funny how like gung-ho he is about wanting to be friends, and that totally tracks for me that there would be people like this, especially these kind of people. Like, this is how they would probably react.
I think we are all very wary, and many of us in the artistic community are like against generative AI, and that's a technology unto itself. But if you took AI and put it into like a cute robot, there's going to be some people that pretty quickly are like pulling for the robot, and like it's like,
that I mean, we're having fun here.
Yeah.
And we're talking about humans' ability to attach to people or to things like this. But obviously, this is a dangerous element in our society, and generative AI is deliberately using this fact about humans against us, in all of its marketing and all of its, like, even just calling it AI, which isn't really accurate to what it does, to play on this exact thing. All the times we've seen in shows, we've seen characters like Murderbot, and they all know, all these people who run these things, that humans like these characters. And so the more they can cast their generative AI as this like lovable being, the more that people are going to like this technology. And I think it is kind of an underhanded marketing tactic that has been used from the jump, unfortunately. But I think we have not seen sentience from an AI. It is certainly debatable whether or not we'd even recognize it if it did occur, but generative AI is not attempting to be sentient, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. It is never trying to be that. It is only trying to mimic what people think like it would say, if that makes sense. Like, it's an autocomplete.
Yeah, it's a large language model that's attempting to, it's regurgitating, right? It's giving back what has been created previously.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, but I guess to go on to a lighter note, in a sense, I've seen people like cheering for delivery bots and stuff in major metropolitan areas and stuff like that. It's kind of my point, is like, that's taking away jobs from humans, and like there's something conflicting about that in a sense. But they make them kind of cute or something, and like humans very quickly get attached to that idea, and like, so the point is this character obviously is attached to Murderbot quite quickly.
Although you could also say this all becomes incredibly muddy when you take into account that there is a significant biological element to Murderbot, and that is something that I brought up in the book a lot too. Like, we don't really know how much of Murderbot is a person, and the show is kind of playing fast and loose with that too. Not really clear. I think it's interesting that when it's noted that every one of these SecUnits has a unique face, I think to me that really says something about these being people, and maybe in a way that the company producing them doesn't want to admit. Right.
I think there's so much interesting stuff going on here, and even in Martha Wells' original material, I found myself leaning towards, if there's organic material, there's going to be a gray area here as far as, is this actually a bot? Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting going forward. I guess it's based on sentience rather than like what we would give it, because if Murderbot thinks of itself as as a bot, then it is a bot in many ways. But then if it was also organic and a person, like where does that line get drawn is very interesting to think about. And like Martha Wells has to navigate that possibly going forward. I assume from a storyteller's perspective, you would want to like explore that space. And just thinking going forward, how to keep the consistency as far as like what we all love about Murderbot, and not have the reveal be, it turns out Murderbot's actually a human.
And I don't think it's ever going to be that cut and dry. And it gets you to play in that gray space, because the fact of the matter is, philosophically, this is something that is being debated for a long time, and is currently being debated as it becomes more and more of a thing that we need to think about. What even is sentience? What does it mean? And it's an open debate, and it's something that we're still trying to figure out as a species. So I like the idea that Murderbot is an avenue towards asking some of these questions, but not necessarily providing a lot of answers. I think that feels appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the way to. That's what we like. Is we like some ambiguity in our
For sure.
storytelling. This fight that goes down, it's pretty epic.
Pretty cool. I like to see the way that Murderbot is predicting the moves. That's something that comes like right out of the book, right? Like it knows exactly what its opponent's going to do, and it is able to use that to counter it. There's a lot of cool stuff there. Yeah, I like the way it was shown, like the little interface that pops up, like sort of in camera. Although the implication is that only Murderbot sees it. I like that. I like how that looks.
Yeah, they're doing a good job with the graphics and some of the CG augmentation in the show in general.
Sure.
I think it's all holding really strong to me. I think it feels like sturdy.
I saw a random like promotional video of Skarsgård getting into the Murderbot suit.
Oh yeah,
That thing is like crazy
Elaborate?
skin tight. Like he has to like
Oh,
it seems
okay.
like he has to like prep his body just to even get it on. And then it's like it has special like ways where they can like he can use the bathroom if he has to. It's very difficult to move in it, and like it's just really, really interesting. It seems like there's some stuff they put over top of it, but mostly it's just like a latex, like super skin tight thing that he's wearing.
Skarsgård suffering for his art.
Yeah.
A couple of funny things in this episode. The character didn't have the gun training like everyone else did.
Oh yeah,
and the
himself in
jokes
the
that are
face,
played
yeah.
for all of that is really fun.
Played a
And
video
that character-
game, which is pretty
Yeah.
hilarious. Yeah.
And that character continues, like you said, to be the sense of comedic relief that I'm enjoying a lot. And then, what goes on with the crew? Eventually, Mensa tells everyone else to leave, stays behind, and kind of lingers at that entrance. And we see Murderbot finish the fight, take down the bot, and then another one comes in and bang, cliffhanger. So that actually gets us right into our next episode. Episode 4 is called Escape Velocity Protocol. Murderbot discovers itself helpless and hallucinating about Sanctuary Moon while being dragged by a hostile SecUnit. After a fight, the hostile SecUnit installs a combat override module into Murderbot. Mensa comes to rescue it, and the other members of the team come to rescue Mensa. Although the hostile SecUnit is defeated by the crew using the hopper as a weapon, Murderbot tells the crew that it has been subverted by the combat override module and it will kill them unless they kill it first. When they fail to act, Murderbot takes a gun from Mensa and shoots itself.
Yeah. So this episode was a big swing, and specifically in the way that the override module taking control is shown. Because we get flashes of Sanctuary Moon. It seems like Murderbot is sort of focused on that. It's as it's like losing control. And then there's the moment where Murderbot sings, which wasn't in the book. Pretty funny. Fights back, but then we also have this like hallucination almost where Murderbot is seeing itself in the show, and we get the really hilarious thing where Skarsgård is in the show with a big crazy wig on.
I love the like pompadour.
Yeah,
like, it's
really
so
funny looking. Yeah.
And then it's a scenario where it's like, you know what to do, start the ship, do escape velocity protocol, all that stuff, and it's like, do the thing, you know how to do this, right? Like,
It reminds me of like a dream, right? Where it's like,
Yes.
where like you're supposed to do something, but you can't remember how to do it. It felt very much like that. This was a big swing, and like I think it worked. I think it was funny. It's definitely very different than anything we get in the first book, at least. What do you think of that? These swings?
I love the stuff with Sanctuary Moon, and then getting back into the real world, having Murderbot think that it's still in Sanctuary Moon and respond
that was funny.
accordingly in some scenarios. And Mensa is like saving the day here, dragging it away. And I thought a lot of that interplay was pretty fun.
I love the like thing where Murderbot couldn't remember. It's like, there's something I was supposed to tell you, and like keeps reaching, and it's like, what are you doing? It's like, I don't know what I'm doing, and like I loved all of that. I thought that was pretty cool.
And for some reason, that's not how I imagined it in the original story. Like I imagined it was
just
taking
plays out
over
a lot
much
faster,
more,
I think.
much more quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the dragging out nature of it does feel it feels in keeping with the show, and like it's played for a bunch of laughs, and the other SecUnit bearing down on them is it's pretty tense up to the very end, and then they get outside and then they're like, stomping a SecUnit with a ship.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah. The one thing I do want to, because we're going to be a little critical at times. One criticism I did have from this episode was I felt like the really advanced SecUnit was definitely a threat until all of a sudden it was like chasing them through the halls and it was giving us time to have these like funny little flashes and stuff. But at that point, turned kind of stormtroopery, was just missing all the time, shooting the walls up, seemed very slow.
Yeah.
Not much of a threat, and then kind of gets somewhat taken out by the ship landing on it. It's funny and it worked. It just like didn't do a lot to sell the threat of this thing, being this sort of unstoppable killing machine that you would imagine an advanced SecUnit like this would be.
Which is a good point as far as the tone that we've been talking about. Like you could see this being played different. You could see this being played much differently in a different show, and maybe this is just like this group again. Maybe it's just like that's how it's affecting, and ultimately it's all in service of the story they're wanting to tell, and it doesn't need to be all that capable. But
it made it feel a little bit toothless, and it made me not as concerned. Like I've read the story, so I'm not that concerned anyway. But like, I think as a first time viewer, you're not as concerned as you might otherwise be for like Mensa actually getting killed by this thing, right? It doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
And the stakes that we talked about, like they were aware of this, and I think at some points you just have to make decisions one way or the other. Like Paul and Chris Weitz, like they said, you can't lose the tension in service of the comedy, but this may be an area where it kind of did a little bit.
It's always going to be a balancing act. Sometimes I think it's going to work, sometimes it's not. And what's the trade-off, right? Like you trade off for one of the comedic moments I think that works for a lot of people probably who saw the show. But it's debatable whether or not you think it's worth the trade-off in tension.
I did feel a bit of the anxiety of the ticking clock of Murderbot being taken over by this override.
Which was cool. And then we get to see it shoot itself, which is right out of the book. Definitely a cool moment. And then... I thought this was a good kind of summation of this whole 2-episode plot that takes place on Delpfall. And then I was surprised by the character showing up, Lee Beebe. This is not a character who was in the book. This is an addition for the show. This is Survivor from Delpfall who joins the group. And I was definitely kind of surprised to see her show up. We might not even see her until the start of next episode, if I'm remembering correctly, but, we're about to get to that. So yeah, I thought this was a fun one. It was kind of a lot of humor, some good action, some big swings. Overall, I think this works for me.
Yeah. So Labibi, does I think show up next episode, but as book readers, a character like this shows up, like what are you skeptical like I am right away? Because this character comes out of the woodwork literally. What's her potential motives? Could she be up to no good? That's definitely a fair thing to worry about, I think. All right, so moving into episode 5 where this all goes down, Rogue War Tracker Infinite is the name of the episode. Mensa decides to take Murderbot back to their habitat when Labibi, surviving member of the Delpfall expedition, appears. She confirms that her teammates were killed by seemingly rogue SecUnits. The preservation team brings her back to their base camp where they repair and reboot Murderbot. Garothan, who is still suspicious of the SecUnit, discovers that it has hacked its governor module even before they contracted it, but Mensa declares to still trust Murderbot because of its actions to protect the team. After that, they conclude that there must have been an unknown hostile third party on the planet. They agree to activate the emergency beacon, which fails. When Mensa and Murderbot fly to the beacon in order to start it manually, it explodes.
Yeah, so I think this is actually ended up being a good spot for our little halfway point stop because we get a big reveal here, and it felt like something we've been building to, and I like that we actually get it here and we can kind of talk about it. And that's where Garothan discovers that Murderbot has hacked its own governor module and is essentially a free agent and or / rogue. And we get the reveal of that. We get the interaction with all the people. We get the cool moment where Murderbot regains control of its body, like after just 30 seconds of not having control of it. Garothan thinks I've got it under control. Murderbot's able to work around that. Immediately gets control of its body. Moment. And picks up Garothan. And again, this further develops their back and forth relationship, which is a very interesting one, as Garothan is smart enough to know that this stuff is going on, is able to investigate and be onto this, but on the other hand seems to be the only one who is not quite ready to trust Murderbot. But it's funny because even Murderbot kind of says that's probably smart, maybe you shouldn't trust me, but on the other hand, fuck you for not trusting me. Which is funny. It's
smart to be skeptical of in this scenario, right? But it is cool to see how out of his league he is in comparison to Murderbot in a lot of these scenarios. And I love that just the fact that they brought back Murderbot reactivated it, even knowing it could be a situation where they all get killed, and for all of the reasons it protected them, everything like that. Finding out that the governor has been hacked previous, all of that stuff is such a cool reveal in the show, or such a cool reveal in the book, and I liked seeing it represented in the show, into that big moment when Murderbot jumps up and grabs Groth, and it's showing its nature. It's showing what's important to it. I found that in Martha Wells' work to be the endearing part of the character. Like I really appreciate the fact that it's almost like the thing of like believing in the goodness of humanity. I almost want to believe in the goodness of even like sentience, AI, like bots in the future. Like maybe I believe in like happy endings or something. Maybe I believe that like the world is inherently good. I don't know. But I like seeing that out of Murderbot in this way.
Well, Murderbot's our character, right? Like even in the show, we're very, very close to Murderbot's perspective. We get this narration throughout, which like we've talked a lot over the years about the sort of voiceover narration and how that is. You could almost always make the argument that in order to accurately, adapt any given piece of fiction, that it makes sense to do voiceover, because then you're going to be able to get the direct thoughts of the character, which is usually exactly what you get in the book, right? You get the direct thoughts of the character.
Now we obviously it's yeah. You're not immediately just advocating for all things to have VO.
And in fact, the opposite. I usually don't like it, because I think in the medium of films, despite that argument, which you could legitimately make, it feels like a bit of a cop-out to me. It feels like you are not leaning into the strengths of the medium. You're not letting the visuals and all the other tools that you have do the work, because in a book you don't have that, and that's why you lean on the thoughts. That's what the strengths of the written medium. All that being said, I do think it makes sense in this project. There are certain ones where I think it makes sense. Like American Psycho made a lot of sense to have voiceover, where it's very internal. Murderbot is very internal, and what Murderbot shows to the rest of the world is so much less interesting than this sort of rich internal life. And that's what we got to be close to appreciate this character. So I think it works here. We do get a lot of it. At times, it felt like Murderbot was commenting on things that I didn't think it should know about. But you could maybe say like, oh, this is like later it learned about it because now it's awake and it's like reading back through logs. And so it's viewing this sort of after the fact. But I think it's a little messy tracking all of that, but ultimately I'm okay with it. You could also say like the whole show the whole book series is called the Murderbot Diaries. So is this something that Murderbot is like in the future sort of relaying to us? And so maybe that's how it's able to be somewhat omniscient in its POV. But ultimately, I don't think most people are probably worried about this. It's just something I noticed.
Yeah. Well, like you said, over reliance on voiceover can be just laziness, and like you said, and can be a shorthand. But that's like the hallmark of this story. The internal nature, the first person POV. Without it, I think you lose a lot.
Yeah, you would lose too much.
And so it definitely makes sense. I think when you choose to use it and for what reasons is where kind of like you were saying, like you think it works here. I know that it works for the story. It's just about like when you're employing it and what exactly is the goal of each thing. I think it's handled pretty well overall. I think they do a good job of it. Some of the comedy comes from it. Some of the exposition and like what we need to know about what's going on with Murderbot come from it. Mm-hmm. Overall, I think that's working really well for me. This episode, I love these scenarios where these characters keep trying to trap Murderbot into conversation. So like sitting down, looking the eye contact situation with Garothan in a past episode. And like that was such a funny moment where it was being forced to make eye contact maintain eye contact. And then was like, can I look away now? All of that kind of thing.
Well, Garothan at one point is like, you can look away now. Started getting uncomfortable with the prolonged eye contact. Yeah.
And then Mensa here with the beacon as they're flying out to it. She's like trying to tell the story of her family and all this stuff.
Yeah, she keeps trying to like tell all these background stories, and like Murderbot is not interested. Oh, I forgot, one of the biggest laughs I had was the I have to go check the perimeter, and then it's like, damn it, he didn't fall for the perimeter thing. And then later it becomes I have to go check the munitions, and you could tell like Murderbot wanted to say perimeter, but they were like on a ship, so it didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's
really funny. I have to go check the perimeter is such a good little like out if you're ever at a party and you need to get out of a conversation. I need to go check the perimeter.
It's great.
And walk away.
That's awesome. I'm going to use that.
It's hilarious. So I did want to talk a little bit about Labibi. One other thing is this is the character I noticed used he, him pronouns when describing Murderbot. And it kind of makes sense because the kind of the gag for Labibi so far is that she seems like very intrigued by the idea of having a sexual relationship with Murderbot and what that might be like. And it's definitely kind of a funny gag. I'm curious to see what they do with this character, like you said, because this is an addition to the from that was not in the book. So it'll be curious to see like what they're playing at. I am a little worried that we're going to be transitioning Murderbot into like he, him pronouns, and that there's going to be an implication that because Murderbot is quote unquote more human, that we should be using he, him pronouns. I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think they'll go that route.
I don't think they're going that way, but it is a concern. So yeah. I will call it out if that's what it does. I don't think that's where we're going. I think they're wise enough to not go that route.
Well, I think in doing it, in using he, him pronouns, I think that they are calling attention to it. They're doing it intentionally. I think that they're showing someone who is misinformed.
Yeah.
I think and I think there's some commentary being made there as far as like understanding and then like referring to.
Well, and it shows the way that she's viewing Murderbot. She's viewing Murderbot as a man and as a sex object. And so that is sort of in keeping with that character and her perspective. So I'll be curious to see what we do with that. Is it not really mentioned? Is this just something kind of for those who notice it going on, or is it something that the show draws more direct attention to? I'll be curious to see.
Yeah, I just think I can see the writing on the wall that Labibi is a character that's like a trap. There's something going on as far as a trap here. She's going to set them up. Yeah, that's very clearly like knowing, obviously we read the book. So I think it's a through line into what we're going to, what I think the rest of the show has.
But I should also say, we don't know for sure that Labibi shouldn't be trusted because not a character in the book. So who knows?
That's just a theory.
Yeah, it's just a theory. All right, man. So that's the end of the 5 episodes we watched. I would say overall, I'm having a really good time with this show. It definitely grew on me. Like at first I was like, that was pretty good. I'm excited to watch episode 2. I'm still a little hesitant. I'm not fully bought in yet, I felt like there was a little bit of cheese early on, but as I really sunk into it and I like got on its page and I kind of saw what it was trying to do, and I saw what Skarsgård was going for with the performance, I also like got more okay with this more emotive version of Murderbot that is more actively disdainful of humans. I think they're setting up like bigger shifts as we go that are maybe less subtle. So I'm interested to see, optimistic for the show going forward, and really exciting to finish this thing out in our next episode.
I would agree with you. I think like when I read Martha Wells' story, I felt like it was like groundbreaking, and I felt like it was like really fresh and really new, and I wasn't struck with that right away by the show. I didn't get that same sense, but I think in Martha Wells' words, like I think it's great fanfic. I think of it in those terms, and I think I'm able to definitely enjoy it in that framing device there, and like I can't wait to watch more of it. We binged 5 episodes of it. Yeah. My fiance was bummed that we couldn't continue, Like, I'm excited to watch more of it. Yeah, but it'll be interesting to compare it to the source material, which is what we do at the end of this coverage.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're listening for the first time, welcome, and if you don't know, the thing we do at the end of our coverage of any particular project is we weigh in on whether or not we thought the adaptation was better than the original. So at the end of our next episode, we'll cast our votes either way, and we won't be influenced by the fact that we will be interviewing Martha Wells. I promise we'll give you our honest reactions. But yeah, speaking of all of that, if you enjoyed our episode on Murderbot, let us know in the form of a rating and review wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We are like 10 subscribers away from 1,000. Maybe we're already there by the time you listen to this, but that's a huge number for YouTube channels to hit. So help us get there.
And be sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, all of those at Ink to Film. We're also on TikTok. So just keep an eye out and search for us. We also have a Discord server if you'd like to join that. We have conversations about movies we're watching, shows, people send their pets, pictures of their pets, which we love to see. Play any video games that we're playing, I think we tend to talk about. So anyway, if you'd like to join that, send us a message on any of those platforms or inktofilm@gmail.com and we'll give you the invite.
And there are 2 other ways you could support our podcast. One of them is we have a bookshop link, which will be in the show notes. On there, we have the books for all of the things that we have covered on the show. That will include All Systems Read, and in fact, all of the Murderbot books will be in our bookshop. If you would like to buy them, which we encourage you to do, if you use that link, you help us out a little bit. We get a little piece of that. It doesn't cost anything extra to you to do that. So we'd love to have your support if you're interested in those books. The other way is we have a Patreon, patreon.com/inktofilm. And on there, you can listen to bonus episodes, which we release every month, as well as the ability to vote on upcoming projects. If you have anything that you're like dying to hear us cover, that's going to be the way to affect what we cover going forward.
And thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right, man. I just want to, one last time here at the end of this episode, point out again that we are doing our first ever live show. I'm really excited about this. James and I live on opposite sides of the country, so this is not something we even like have the chance to do much. Every now and then we've gotten together to record, but it's always just been at like one of our houses. So this is our first time we're going to be up in front of a crowd, and I'm a little nervous, but like I've been on a bunch of panels in the past, but this is very new territory for you.
Yeah, I'm not one to do panels usually. I've been to conventions quite a few times. I feel confident in the fact that we've recorded many episodes of the podcast, so I think it'll be a good time.
Yeah,
and having someone like Martha Wells, it's just going to be a joy. I'm sure it's going to be awesome.
It's really cool. You're also on another panel. Like I was going to say, if you want to know what else I'm going to be on, I'm on 4 other panels. I'm going to post about that on social media, and I'm sure James will as well. So you can find out where to find him. If you do end up coming, if you're coming to Worldcon, let us know so we can say hi to you. We can share our schedules. It would be great. I know tons of people who are coming up from like the Portland area up there. A bunch of former guests from the show are going to be at Worldcon. We've been talking about like maybe we can find ways to record little updates with them or something and find a way to release that to people maybe on Patreon. So I'm really excited about Worldcon, man, coming up in August. It's like next month. It's coming so fast.
I can't believe it. Yeah, it's so wild. I'm really excited for it. It's going to be a really fun time. We'll get to hang out and we'll get to meet a bunch of people and interview Martha Wells.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. Oh, I'm on another panel with Matt Ruff. Former someone it's crazy. We did Lovecraft Country, so I'll get to meet him, which is really cool. It's really awesome. So we'll be talking about that more as we go forward. But that's going to be it for this episode. So until next time,
keep adapting.